Thought you might like to see the old Singer vs2 machine in operation. I have got a darning foot on it, and they're basically shaped like this. This lever goes over the uh, needle bar screw, and there's as the needle goes up and down, the foot lifts up and down. I don't know if you can see this here, but you get just a little jump up on that as it goes, and that what that does is that relieves the pressure on the fabric just long enough to move it along those feed dogs, because these old machines you couldn't lift the feed dogs. Now on the old machines like these, I find that the modern type free motion quilting foot just doesn't work because there's not enough pressure. They want to jump too easily. These are much tighter, and it puts more pressure on the fabric and makes it able to form the stitch. If there's not enough force on that on one of these old machines, you'll get skipped stitches. And a lot of people think that because they keep getting so many skipped stitches, they can't use one of these old machines that have the long shuttle type bobbin. And let's see if I have one to show you. I just had one here a minute ago. That's the kind of bobbin that goes in there. It's this long, well, let me get it in the frame. There, it's these long, skinny, kind of barbell-looking bobbins, and when you wind it, they go into these the bobbin winder over here, and that rides on the belt and spins around, and that's what winds the bobbin. And the bobbin shuttle is, instead of a bobbin case, is a big long thing. Anyway, so a lot of people think that these machines won't do a good job of free motion quilting because they skip stitches all the time, and the reason that they do that is because there's not enough pressure on the foot. At least that's been my experience. So I've got it set up to do some free motion, and let me zoom in a little bit. And this machine was made in, I think I figured it out at about 1880 or something in that neighborhood. And it makes really a nice stitch. Now I have to go pretty slow compared to what I would do on a modern machine, because if I go too fast, I tend to break the bobbin thread. But if you look at the stitching, comes out pretty nice. This is a heavyweight suede look upholstery fabric that I'm using. This will become tote bags, so I like to use a heavy fabric for those. But nothing says you have to certainly use that. Regular quilting fabric works great on these. One of the things that you want to do with any new project, when you have a different needle or a different thread or a different matting, test beforehand to make yourself a little quilt sandwich with the same fabric, top, backing, and batting that you're going to use on your thread that you're going to use on your real quilt or piece that you're working on, and test until you get the tension right. And one of the ways that you can test the tension, I think the easiest, is to use the same weight thread top and bottom, but a different color. And if you look at if your tension is good, you should not be able to see any of the top thread on the bottom and any of the bottom thread on the top. And that's why it's easy to test your tension with different colors of thread, because it's easier to see whether your stitches are pulling through or not. The other thing about these older machines, from what I have experienced anyway, and I pretty much only use my real old ones, they do better when your threads match. So if you're using, and in this case I'm using 40 weight cotton thread, so if you're using a 40 weight cotton on the top, you're going to have a lot better results if you use 40 weight cotton in your bobbin as well. It's easier to get balanced tension when the threads match. And if you look at the foot here, if you can see that, it doesn't look like it's jumping at all. But it really is. Just a little bit. Just enough to, again, it just takes some of the drag off of the feed dogs. I have my stitch length turned down to the lowest, or you know, the closest to 0 as I can get it. And that helps also. And I've also got one of those Teflon quilting sliding mats under this machine, under the fabric here on the machine bed. And I find that's really helpful so that I don't need to use quilting gloves. It creates enough slide for me that I don't need quilting gloves. Now, you probably can hear that this machine is not tremendously quiet. It's got quite a little chug to it. And the treadle I've got it in is pretty quiet. This is all the sound that the machine is making. And it's that back and forth of the thread shuttle, and it kind of rattles as it goes back and forth. I probably can do a little more tuning up and getting it to be quieter, and I may have missed a few points where it needs a little more cleaning and oiling, but I wanted to do some real sewing on it, and so I've still got a lot of cleanup to do on the machine head itself to get it looking prettier. The decals are pretty much all worn off. The whole machine at one point had been painted black over the top of the whole thing, so it took me a while to kind of scrape off most of that black paint. I'm sure at some point in its past somebody thought, this machine is looking shabby, I think I'm going to give it a facelift and paint it black, and they thought they were doing the right thing. Of course, I'd like to kill them now, but it's too late. I'm sure they're already past. Because that paint, I could tell, had been on it for years. During the I can't even remember what years it was. I want to say it was around the war, when Singer was, most of the Singer factories got conscripted into making war materials. So they were not, there was a period of time where there was hardly any actual sewing machine production left at the Singer factories. So what people would do is bring in one of their old machines to one of the Singer dealers, and they would refurbish them, which meant they would get a new paint job, and they'd probably have their whole works taken apart and cleaned, and they would get maybe a new bobbin winder, and most often, they would then be electrified. And so you'd have what they would say essentially a brand new machine, and they would, other companies did it as well, other sewing machine dealers. Anyway, so a lot of times you'll see a very old Singer sewing machine that does not have the correct paint job, and it doesn't have the right wheel on it, the right hand wheel on it, and it may have a motor where it never would have before. I've run out of bobbin thread, so I have to stop. Anyway, a lot of times, see where I ran out. So a lot of times you'll see an old machine that's been painted in a way that it wouldn't have normally been done because it was refurbished or factory refurbished back in the day, and so that can throw you off. This one was not the case. Somebody painted this at home with a brush. Everything was painted. All the silver parts were painted. The Singer badge was painted. There's still a lot of paint on that needs to come off, so this was not professionally refinished. But every time I sit down and work on it, I get my fingernail in there and start scraping paint off. So there's still a lot of it on there. Anyway, I hope to unearth more of its decals and see what might be left of those. Anyway, the machine does a pretty nice job of free motion machine quilting. So almost any machine can be made to do nice work in quilting. So don't be afraid to try your machine. It doesn't have to be a 1887 machine. It can be a 1940 machine, or a 50 or a 60 or a 70. I just want you to know that you don't need to spend a fortune to be able to learn how to do free motion quilting. After you've practiced and tried it with one of these, you may want to move up to a more fancy machine, but you don't have to have one to get it to work. So happy quilting.